Welcome to the Bariatric Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristen Lloyd, mindset mentor, somatic coach, and transformational guide for those on the path to true healing. Whether you've had weight loss surgery or on GLP-1s or simply seeking a new way forward with food and your body, this space is for you. This podcast is a mission to change the narrative, unlearning the patterns that no longer serve you, moving beyond quick fixes into deep, embodied healing, lasting mindset shifts, and true self-leadership. We are healing from the roots, rewiring the mind, regulating the body, and returning home to ourselves. We are here for growth rooted in honesty and self-trust because that, my friends, is the foundation of healing. So grab your cup of joe or your H2O and let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bariatric Mindset Success Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kristen Lloyd. So it's spooky season. And while everyone is scared of candy, the real horror is the haunting loop of perfectionism, procrastination, people-pleasing, and powerless thinking that shows up every single holiday season. So many of us who have been on a health and wellness journey, losing weight, keeping it off, many of us who have had weight loss surgery, and those who are on GLP-1s, there is so much stress and pressure around the holiday season. So today we're going to talk about the 4 P's that haunt you and the 3 that heal you. Because the truth is, the Halloween candy bowl, the family party, the I'll start over Monday or next Monday, or I'll start it back on track in January is part of the problem. So today, we're pulling back the mask on those patterns and learning how to replace them with the 3 Ps that actually set you free. And this is going to be a game changer, so let's dig in. As we get started, I want you to start to notice your thinking patterns and to look back at all of the years that you may have been stuck in diet mentality or making promises to yourself around food or around fitness or around your health journey, or the pressure that you have created with regards to your weight loss, how this year or this month or this week or even how today might be different. So the first thing that I want to bring up is the illusion of magical thinking. Magical thinking is one of those things that will kill your progress because while it offers a sense of hope, it is not based in reality. So we want to look at what the illusion of magical thinking is. I'll be better next week. This time will be different. When really nothing fundamental has changed, or you haven't sought to change anything. Now, when I say change, I do not mean restriction. I do not mean promising yourself, I won't have that, I won't want that, because you're still going to engage in very similar activities. You're still going to go to the grocery store. You're still going to drive by a Dunkin' Donuts on your way home from work. There are certain patterns in your environment that will be consistent, right? And that's something to really look at in your life is this time will be different. I'll be better next week. And I lived this for years. My going to bed self, right? My nighttime self would have grandiose visions of what my morning self would do. And for a very long time, it didn't happen because I had not built the foundation of what was needed. And the magical thinking, the illusion of magical thinking kept me stuck in a loop, and it keeps many people stuck in a loop because when you have that hope, the hope is not the problem. Having hope, having that desire of wanting things to change is profound. It's beautiful. It's significant. However, we have to call it out with love, right? Because magical thinking is your brain's favorite coping mechanism. It's a dopamine hit of false hope because the brain, this is psychology, the brain prefers fantasy over friction, right? Friction. So fantasy over friction. And so it's going to crave that instant relief over the long-term growth, right? Our brains are designed to find the easiest path, the path of least resistance. That's not bad, and that's not lazy. That's actually energy conservation from a psychological viewpoint. So we don't want to think of it in terms of, oh, I'm just lazy. No, that's how all human brains work. So what we want to reframe magical thinking as is that it's emotional procrastination disguised as optimism, right? It's emotional procrastination disguised as optimism. So we want to call out the magical thinking. So this happens a lot of times, October, November, December, towards the end of the year. It can happen any time of the year. I'll get to it. I'll get back on track. When you don't have self-trust, then what ends up happening is you wake up the next day or you intend to start back on Monday and your Sunday night or your Monday self isn't on the same page because when we think about other factors like emotion regulation, task management, time management, habits, if you have been partying with foods all week and then you wait until the very last minute on Sunday to quote unquote change your behaviors or, okay, now I'm going to live differently and restrict. That's what brings on a diet mentality. That's what also brings on the fear of missing out, not having those things. And then you delay, right? So then there's that procrastination. But the magical thinking isn't so much about the diet mentality. The magical thinking is I'll be better next week. Here's what I'll do. And I don't know about you guys, but I was the queen of plans. Okay, this is the time I'm going to work out. This is the exercise I'm going to do. These are the meals that I'm going to prep. And then the weekend would come and none of it would happen. And then I would break trust with myself. And that's what started, or it didn't necessarily start the pattern, but it kept the pattern alive with recognizing I couldn't trust myself. And I wasn't in a healthy place with honoring my needs. And so I was very permissive. Where it was, if I wanted something, I would have it. And I wasn't truly honoring not just my body's needs, but health needs. I wasn't calling myself out and challenging the quote unquote promises that I made myself, nor was I able to strategically see the magical thinking. And what's really important to recognize is that we don't have a filter inside of our own head. And so one of the ways to start becoming aware of the magical thinking is to recognize, what am I telling myself about holiday parties? Am I saying just this once and then I have 10? Am I saying just one and I'm honoring just one? Am I struggling with cravings? And this is something that we want to understand in ourselves and address. So a quick journal question here for you guys that I would love for you to write down. I'm also going to put it in the show notes is, where am I waiting for future me to save me from present me's choices, right? So where are you expecting your future self to come in and save you from your current self, your present self's choices? Now, if that doesn't kick you in a butt, I don't know what will. But that's where we've got to call out the illusion of magical thinking that everything will be perfect. We live in this idealized situation where we're going to start over. We're going to be excited about it. We're going to love it, want it. It's going to be amazing. And we're going to follow through with all the things. That's not reality. So what we do want to do is start to recognize what is reality, right? And what are some ways that we can start to infuse, or that you can start to infuse normal eating, normal behaviors into every day, and recognize what your limits are. So you're going to need boundaries with self. So when at your office or at different parties, if there are specific foods, what are you telling yourself, or how do you navigate cravings and urges? And yes, I know that there is a portion of people who are on GLP-1 medications. I know that many of you guys have had surgery, but I want to say something that is really, really, really important here is relying solely on GLP-1s or your surgery to do the work is irresponsible. It really, really is. Because as you guys may have heard me say before, food noise, the different types of food noise are not just biological. They're emotional, they're somatic, they're conditioned, they're programming, their identity, their environment. So you could see a plate of this or that during the holiday season, different types of foods, and have specific cravings or, oh, I remember that from my childhood and connection. And there's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with having desire. There's nothing wrong with urges and cravings, except when you fear them, they become a problem because you don't know how to handle them. You don't know what to do. And a lot of people don't know how to listen or tune in to their bodies truthfully because we're a lot of times disconnected from our bodies. We're in our logic brain, we're all in our heads, and we're not in our bodies. And being in your body, making peace with your body, trusting your body, listening to your body is an important part of addressing cravings and urges, because a lot of this is the mind-body connection. Your body is sending signals to the brain. Your brain is sending signals to the body. So it's not solely thoughts here. It's not solely thoughts. It's physiology. And that's something that's really important to address, is that the idea of I'll start over after the holidays, I'll be good, I don't want to upset anyone, or I can't stop myself, right? These are not failures of willpower, right? They're failures of strategy, nervous system regulation, self-trust, and it does not mean your medication or your surgery isn't working, because hunger and desire are totally normal and natural things. They're a part of life, yet we fear them because we have been told for so long as a result of diet mentality that either we shouldn't be hungry or we shouldn't be that hungry. And then we also have highly palatable foods, which also contribute to food noise and to cravings and to urges. So one of the things that we need to normalize at a very baseline level is that hunger, having true physical hunger, is part of the human experience. Let's take a moment there and just let that sink in. Physical hunger is part of the human experience. It's biological. And when you're afraid of it, right, when you want to control it, when you want to subdue it because you don't know what to do with it, right? I understand that there are some folks that say, oh, this food noise is out of control and the urges and the desires. What it also shows me is that we have no training for understanding ourselves. We have no guidance or wisdom that's coming from our bodies. And all we know is shut it down, subdue it, control it. And that's what a lot of people try to do with food. And the thing is, you've heard me say this before, food is not something to be controlled. And a lot of times when we feel out of control with food, it's not the food itself. It's the underlying feelings, sensations, urges, cravings, desires that we have that are showing up in our bodies and in our brain that we don't know what to do with, right? So, reminder, having desire, having hunger, not a failure of willpower. You want to start to assess what is showing up. What is the meaning that I've created around these foods? What makes them feel special? How will I feel when I have them? What's showing up when I desire them? It's not about judgment, no criticism. It's just about examining it and practicing curiosity that can help you to grow and heal your relationship with food, right? So I mentioned today that we're going to talk about the 4 Ps. Remember, it's not candy that's scary. It's the thinking behind it, right? So we're digging deep into the psychological ghosts that haunt your progress every holiday season. And the 4 Ps that we're going to be talking about are perfectionism, procrastination, people-pleasing, and powerless thinking, okay? Perfectionism, procrastination, people-pleasing, and powerless thinking. And then I'm going to be talking about the 3 Ps that will heal you, okay? That will help you to heal yourself and your relationship with food and to help go deeper this holiday season. So perfectionism is the all or nothing ghost that convinces you that one candy equals failure, right? And so perfectionism is where we get stuck in that all or nothing paradigm. And if I have this one, I'm bad and I need to be good. So we need to stop moralizing candy. We need to stop moralizing. Each person needs to know themselves and how they respond to sugar and how they respond to certain foods. And that is actually going to help you more than anything. I work with folks who are recovering emotional eaters. I work with folks who are self-described or self-defined food addicts. And food addiction, it has a lot of underpinnings with any other type of addiction where we look at trauma. There are emotional eating patterns in addiction, but where addiction patterns show up also has a lot to do with brain chemistry and how your body responds to things like white flour, white sugar, and certain chemically laden, highly palatable foods. Because what I have seen and what I've seen in a lot of the research is nobody is getting addicted to broccoli or blueberries. I have yet to meet a person who is addicted to broccoli or blueberries. If they exist, please put me in touch with them because I have some research I'd like to conduct. I'd like to talk to them. So when we're looking at someone who self-identifies as having food addiction, what typically shows up is that they have one and then they feel that they can't stop. So it's also the brain circuitry, the dopamine pathways. And believe me, I'm not going to talk about this in today's episode, but there are many other ways to get dopamine other than with food or with sugar. However, what we know and what the research shows with regards to folks who may identify as having more of a sugar addiction or food addiction is that ultimately you need to know yourself. Because if you're someone who has one and feels like I can't stop. One of the other things that I'm going to be talking about today is powerless thinking. And that's one of the other Ps. So I don't want to jump into that too quickly. I will address thinking and how that impacts people who have self-identified as food addicts. However, what shows up often in people who self-identify as addiction is understanding how you respond and knowing, is it better to abstain? So all of the research for food addiction shows that abstinence from white flour and white sugar is more beneficial. Someone who is an emotional eater, and this was something that I recognized on my own journey, pre-op to post-op, was I thought I was a food addict. I am not. I am a recovering emotional eater, and making that distinction for me did not come until after I had weight loss surgery and after I did some deep, meaningful work with myself, on myself, therapeutic, coaching, otherwise, to get into the underpinnings of what am I noticing in my relationship with food. So this isn't just something you decide one day or you identify by naming it, is you want to recognize how do you respond to certain foods and what shows up. So this episode is not about food addiction, but I want to call that out just a little bit because it also can go hand in hand with that perfectionism and how you identify yourself, how you identify your experiences. And the perfectionism, while doesn't have anything to do specifically with addiction, what can come up is, how do I identify in my relationship with food? And am I someone who is an emotional eater? Am I someone who maybe identifies more in that addiction category? And how does perfectionism impact me? Does it show up in that good or bad? Does it show up in that you have to be doing things right all the time? Is there a lot of stress when you recognize you've made a mistake? Do you have to start all over? Is there a lot of self-punishment? So what we do know about perfectionism is that it breeds shame, and that the shame fuels the binge restrict cycle. So this is also where disordered eating patterns come in. So not classifying necessarily emotional eating or food addiction, but now we can talk about what we call disordered eating patterns, which could be an eating disorder or just disordered eating. So there may be eating a lot or binging where you may have several candies. Even if you are a bariatric patient, I have worked with people who have said, I've had half a bag of Hershey's Kisses today, or I've had 10 of those little fun size bars. And there's a lot of judgment and shame. So with perfectionism, what we want to do is recognize that progress is more important than perfection, and that regulation is always going to be better than restriction. And when people have cravings, desires, urges, we also want to look at, are you regulated? And what that means when we think about regulation, I think about nervous system regulation. I think about, are you stressed, right? Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired? What else is coming up, right? We think of that HALT, right? And another great acronym, if you've never heard it before, is BLASTED. And this is a powerful self-awareness tool often used in therapy, trauma recovery, emotional regulation work. May also be used in 12-step programs. I'm not sure, but it's definitely a step up from the simpler HALT method or acronym, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So BLASTED helps to identify met needs or emotional triggers that can lead to reactive or self-sabotaging behaviors like emotional eating, avoidance, numbing. Okay, so here's what BLASTED stands for. And then I'm going to give you some tools to utilize the meaning and what to ask yourself. And I will be putting these in the show notes as well. So BLASTED, bored, lonely, anxious or angry, stressed or sad, tired, emotional or embarrassed, deprived or disconnected. So let's go to bored. Am I seeking stimulation, distraction because I feel disengaged or unfulfilled, right? Then we want to ask ourselves, what's missing in my environment, in my day, in my life that could bring me back to feeling alive or purposeful? So we're looking for what's missing, but then what can bring me alive? What can help me to reconnect with my purpose? Lonely. What's our meaning there? Am I craving connection, attention, or validation, right? So then we want to ask ourselves, do I need to reach out to be seen or simply sit with the discomfort of solitude, right? Is it something that you might need to sit with a little bit? Or it could be the discomfort of solitude, but it could be disappointment as well. And a lot of us don't know how to handle disappointment. So angry or anxious. So am I frustrated, fearful, tense about something unresolved? And then what you can ask yourself is, what boundary was crossed, or what emotion needs expression, or what's outside of my control, right? Because sometimes anxiety is about things that are outside of our control that we're not in control of. And so it may be that we need to surrender to what's happening around us and refocus on what we can control, which is us in our emotional state and doing the best that we can with what we have in this moment. So stressed or sad, am I emotionally overloaded or feeling low? What to ask yourself, what support, rest, or comfort do I actually need? And I will say this all the time. If you are physically hungry, yes, eat. But when you are in a blasted state or stressed, sad, any of these feelings, we want to look for comfort, rest, and support that is not food, because what we want to do is reinforce other coping mechanisms and other patterns that will support us rather than utilizing food to cope. Other thing that's very important is, even before shifting to how do I cope, is addressing the underlying dysregulation or dysfunction or the mental and emotional stuff that's coming up. And are you able to sit with it? Have you been in therapy? Are you working with a trauma-informed therapist or trauma-informed coach on helping you to navigate your emotions and maybe even learning about emotions in general or how to feel them. That could be fantastic for you this holiday season. Okay, tired. Is my energy depleted mentally, emotionally, physically? And then what to ask yourself, would rest or some type of reset, right? And I'm thinking sleep is a reset, right? Serve me more than reacting right now. Noticing if you're tired, if you're fatigued, right? So emotional or embarrassed. Am I over-identifying with a specific feeling or am I experiencing a shame spiral, right? So what to ask yourself, can I name what I'm feeling instead of feeding it? That's so important. Can I name what I'm feeling instead of feeding it? And then are we deprived or disconnected? Am I missing joy, nourishment, or even spiritual fulfillment? And ask yourself, what's something small that could reconnect me to meaning or pleasure right now? And again, if we have found all of our pleasure in food, or food is our go-to resource, this is a beautiful way for us to check in, a beautiful way for you to check in with yourself and to ask where you receive pleasure from. Where do you connect with meaning, pleasure, comfort, support, right? All of these things, because they're an important part of life. And if we're only getting them from food, then we're using food for more than just nourishment. And while emotional eating, it will still happen at times, what we want to do is reduce emotional eating from a high percentage to a low percentage. So if you're someone who says, I always emotionally eat, that could be your perfectionism. And maybe you are in the 80% range. So what we want to do is move it so that it's less than 20. And friends, that's a practice. That's a practice. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So again, coming back to perfectionism, after that little side quest over there that we took to halt and blasted, perfectionism, acknowledging where we may be in a perfectionistic mindset, it also comes with judgment, criticism, shame, blame. And we have this fear of, well, I can't let myself get off the hook. We need compassion. Compassion is really important. If you don't know what compassion is, it's essentially self-kindness. How do you treat yourself like you would other people? And what's really important with compassion is you're not, quote unquote, letting yourself get off the hook. You're learning how to trust yourself, and you're learning how to make mistakes, how to forgive, and how also to hold yourself to certain boundaries. And that is part of what I teach in deeper courses, because that itself is a practice and a process, because we need to develop self-trust in order to believe that we will follow through on what we'll say that we will do. The thing is, often when there's perfectionism, the things that we follow through on is self-punishment and shaming and judgment and criticism. And that really fuels the binge restrict cycle, which I talked about. So we want to reframe that all progress is important, and that when we do mess up, because we will, how can we learn from it? So progress is more important than perfection, because perfectionism limits us. It keeps us rigid, right? Regulation and learning how to regulate not just our nervous system, but our emotions, our thoughts, our experiences, right? When we learn how to regulate, we're all not going to be regulated, by the way. Regulation is not this eye in the sky. It's learning how to pull yourself out of low places, how to pull yourself out of fight, flight, how to pull yourself out of extreme emotions. And it's a process. So regulation is more powerful and more potent than restriction, because we won't be in control of everything. And this is also where perfectionism is born. Perfectionism is born from anxiety a lot of times, the idea that I have to be perfect. I'm not allowed to make mistakes. People are watching me. People are counting on me. And a lot of times it's developed and formed in childhood, right? So that's important to address. So the next one, procrastination. So sometimes the negative magical thinking that comes with procrastination is you may give yourself a holiday permission slip, postponing self-leadership in the name of seasonal chaos. We want to reframe that. We want to do something different, because those holiday permission slips are what get you in a ton of trouble, because what it's doing is it's not allowing you to trust yourself. It's not giving you the environment that you need to grow and learn and evolve, because really, if anything, the holidays are kind of a boot camp. The way that I think of the holidays they are a boot camp. They're a fantastic example of how you get training in navigating urges and cravings, being kind to yourself, understanding what's really important to you, and ditching the restriction diet mentality, while also learning how to navigate the ups and downs of eating and the ins and outs of parties and get-togethers and boundaries and real life. So that's what's really important, is that when you put your journey on hold, you're not doing yourself a service. You're actually doing yourself a disservice, right? Because what ends up happening is we end up experiencing the concept of cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance is the psychological discomfort that we experience when a person holds two conflicting beliefs, attitudes, or when their behavior contradicts their beliefs, right? So it's essentially conflicting thoughts or conflicting cognition. So it's inconsistency, psychological inconsistency that can lead to discomfort and tension and feelings of guilt, anxiety, or being unsettled. So we as individuals have a motivation to resolve the cognitive dissonance, to find a sense of internal consistency. So where cognitive dissonance shows up is it lends to the procrastination process. So if you're on this journey and you're like, oh, the holidays, right? Where does dissonance come up in the holidays at all? So procrastination could be, well, the holidays only come around a couple times a year, won't be that bad, right? And you start to look for where your brain starts to resolve the conflict of the dissonance, of the conflicting information in your head. But here's the thing. You want peace and progress, but your choices create pressure, right? So you may create excuses or explanations or justifications, or you may even manipulate the information because you don't want to change the behavior. And there are some people who do change the behavior, but temporarily, until they struggle with changing the behavior. And then they rely unintentionally, unconsciously on manipulation or justification or lying to themselves, because the cognitive dissonance, that conflict, that psychological conflict is too much. So I'm going to say this phrase again. You want peace and progress, but your choices create pressure. And what I mean by your choices is the choices to continue with things that aren't helping you or supporting you to reach your goals. Now, this is not about restriction. Remember, this is about learning how to eat differently, how to be differently, how not just to manage your weight, but manage your health, right? That's what this journey is about. So where also procrastination, but also cognitive dissonance can come in is, well, I don't have to worry about what I eat now that I'm on a GLP-1. I don't have to worry about that. It's done it for me. That creates dissonance to some degree because it's reducing the conflict that you may actually have to address your eating patterns, which you do, and you're kind of turning that power over to something outside of yourself. And that's where a lot of people struggle, is they don't want to actually have to deal with their relationship with food. Well, I don't have to worry. I can have cake now because I'm on a GLP-1, or I can do this now. The problem with that line of thinking, friends, is it's a slippery slope. And when it comes to procrastination and procrastinating this journey and the footwork, honoring where you are and delaying your work through the holiday season, it's a decision, right? So delay is a decision. Your procrastination is a decision, and you're still choosing something, right? So even if you pretend or, I'll just deal with it later, I'm not going to think about it now, I'm stressed, right? Choose wise, choose consciously, because delay is a decision. You're turning your power over to chance. You're turning your power over to I'll worry about it later, to that procrastination. And this is not a warning in the sense, I'm not trying to scare you at all. My point is, when you procrastinate or postpone, again, in the name of seasonal chaos, you are not paying attention to your choices. You may not be paying attention to your hunger signals. And then it becomes that much harder when you start back, because then there is more powerlessness, more judgment, more criticism, because then you look back and say, oh my gosh, why didn't I? And then there's more aim that also is fueled. So think about the cost of perfectionism and procrastination so far, right? What is the cost? So these are just two of the 4 Ps that haunt you. So when you turn your power over to perfectionism and procrastination, you're the one who suffers. Now, number 3, people pleasing, right? Saying yes to everyone else is ultimately saying no to yourself. I'm going to say that again. Saying yes to everyone else is ultimately saying no to yourself. So early conditioning from childhood can create not just codependency, but this feeling that we are loved and approved of and special when we do for others. What's really important to understand is how self-care and taking care of ourselves and putting ourselves first, putting ourselves as important people in our lives is not selfish. It's actually a fundamental foundation of self-care and self-leadership. So people-pleasing creates self-abandonment, self-betrayal, right? So let's talk about this from a holiday standpoint. Your early conditioning creates holiday hostess martyrdom, right? Where everyone else is taken care of. And do you really enjoy the season? Or are you over there finishing up plates or taking bits and bites of different things automatically, but not by choice? Because remember, I had said this in procrastination, delay is a decision, but people-pleasing is also born of not wanting to experience discomfort through boundaries. So when you don't set boundaries with other people, you also don't know how to set boundaries with yourself. And then there's guilt when you do need to set boundaries. So then there's also avoidance, procrastination. And when you're avoiding setting boundaries with yourself or others, it's usually because you don't want to experience that extreme discomfort of telling someone no, or of telling someone that doesn't work for me. And so this is where you martyr yourself and your journey, how you eat, where you eat, when you eat. And oftentimes, because you don't know how to handle discomfort, you eat it, right? So it's not the only place where emotional eating is born, but it's definitely one of the big ones on the list. So we want to discuss the difference between connection and compliance, because when we think of love as compliance, we're giving away our power, right? And if you're a child, compliance is where you likely learned people pleasing. And when you look at connection versus compliance for the average people pleaser, they can look the same because you show up, you follow through, you say yes, you participate in whatever is required of the holidays. You put on the spread, you host things at your home. But the energy underneath really determines whether it's healing or self-abandoning. Because if there's resentment, if there's anger, if you're upset because you're overextended, you've done too much, that's problematic. And that's a boundary issue. If people come to you because they know that you have a good heart, they know that you'll say yes, and you do say yes when you mean to say no, that's self-betrayal and self-abandonment, right? So compliance is rooted in fear and external validation. Compliance says, I'm doing this so I don't disappoint someone, so I don't get in trouble, so I don't have to feel guilty. I don't want to feel guilty. It comes from survival and appeasement, and definitely it is the cornerstone of people pleasing. So you're conforming to avoid discomfort, your own and potentially someone else's. You're not choosing from clarity or power. Compliance temporarily soothes your anxiety, but like I said a minute ago, it builds resentment and burnout over time. So connection, however, is choosing something because it aligns with your values, your needs, and your goals. It comes from a place of present self-awareness and self-leadership and self-ownership. You're engaging with something because it feels like a yes in your body, not an obligation in your mind. And connection fuels long-term behavior change because it's anchored in safety and self-trust. And so when you say yes to something through connection, it's honored. You can also say no, and you're honoring that connection with yourself. But why this is important is because you're able to honor the discomfort. You're able to honor the discomfort in saying no to something that isn't going to serve you or that would show up as resentment if you were to say yes. So that's something that's very vital to recognize is where does people pleasing show up during your holiday season? And where are you likely to say yes when you really need to be saying no to others and saying yes to yourself? So if we think about the holiday season and these P's that haunt you, how do we transform these P's? Well, we have one more to go, and then I'm going to share with you the 3 P's that heal. So the last P is powerless thinking. So I can't stop. I lose control around food. So this whole paradigm of powerless thinking is built on this premise of learned helplessness, of dysregulated nervous systems, and not feeling completely out of control, but not knowing how to access control. The thing is, it's not about controlling food. It's about regulating your nervous system. It's about how you interact with food, but also your relationship with yourself and your body. So here's the important teaching for powerless thinking. It is not a lack of willpower. It's a lack of pause power. Many people who think I can't stop or I lose control around food are often dissociated. They're disconnected from their bodies and they're on an autopilot where you're not even in your head. So when there's an urge, what's very important is that there is this pause. And I think it was a quote by Viktor Frankl where he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And that is where your power lies. I'm going to say it again. So famous quote by psychiatrist, existential psychologist, and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose. Many people who have impulse control issues, those who are neurodivergent, ADHD, have binge eating disorder, and things like that, a lot of times people will say, I can't stop. What is true is that you can, it is not practiced. It is not automatic. So what needs to happen is that you start by practicing awareness, because when people say, oh, but I can't pause because I have ADHD. No, you don't understand. I have impulse control issues. No, I can't do that because I have binge eating disorder. So you can use the diagnostic criteria as an excuse, or you can shift and pivot and say, this is not yet conditioned in me. I have not yet learned this skill on how to pause. So the work to shift out of powerless thinking is to practice the pause. So it's not a lack of willpower. It is not a lack of willpower that you are stuck in powerless thinking. It is a lack of pause power, because that is where your power is, in the pause. So from a neuropsychological standpoint, the best way to create change from an urge or a craving is to practice that pause over and over and over. And that's also where you're going to retrain your brain, and to have awareness of what's showing up for you, what the trigger is, what your desires are, right? To also present yourself with different choices and then create the change. Now, are you likely to facilitate this 1 out of every 10 times when you initially try it? Yes. Your follow through is going to be on the low end because it's not practiced, because you've never done it before. So if I told you to go and ride a bike and you've never ridden a bike before, what are the chances you're going to fall off? Yeah, highly likely. Same thing with anything else. So your powerless thinking has you convinced that you can't or you won't. And honestly, friends, it's bullshit, because it's also rooted in the other 3, right? Perfectionism, procrastination, people pleasing. The powerless thinking is I can't. Why? Because you've never done it before. But just because you've never done it before doesn't mean you won't ever do it. It means that you haven't practiced it. So what we want to do is recognize that your urge doesn't always equal you eating the whole bag or the whole cake, or that you're not trustworthy. It's that you haven't executed anything differently than the old habit cycle, than the old pattern. And if you want to go through this holiday season with the same old BS, you go for it. But I'm here sharing this with you because your opportunity to shift and to change is within you. It's not outside of you. One of the things that I tell my clients, I had somebody come a week or 2 ago, and she'll know who she is if she listened to this. She had bariatric surgery, had weight loss surgery, and then also utilized a GLP-1 to lose the last 20 or 35 pounds to get to goal. And she said, I'm thinking about going back on it. What do you think? And I said to her, if you think this is going to help you to do the emotional work, absolutely use it. If you think this is going to help you to get underneath the discomfort and your emotions with food and your relationship with your body, then sure, get back on it. And she said, well, it totally numbed me out. I had no hunger. I actually forgot to eat. And while it did bring me to goal, one of the reasons I weaned off of it was because I didn't want to lose any more, and because I had no hunger cues, nothing. And I was like, oh. So one of the things that we worked on was how she would utilize these skills and other skills right now when she can connect with her hunger, and to start to figure out, when is hunger, that noise too loud? When is it not? And she made the choice about waiting a little bit before deciding to get back on it. She may not, because this, friends, isn't about judgment about whether you're on it or not. This journey is about, is it helping you to get clear on what's showing up for you? And if you're turning your power over to something outside of you, like surgery or like a medication to do the work for you, because you don't want to have to handle, things are still going to come in different ways. I'm not saying that you will or won't lose or gain, because this is not judgment. Everybody's body is different. However, if you have emotional issues with food, they will not dissipate because you're on a medication, because the surgery and the medication works on hormones, and the surgery worked on your stomach. It doesn't work on the emotional center of your brain. It does not deal with that. So that's something that you want to address, right? Are you turning your power over instead of addressing some of these underlying emotional connection, interpersonal things that are showing up? Are you turning your power over to something outside of you? Now, do you need that support? Like I suggested to this one client, I was like, yes, use it, because if that's going to tone it down a little so that you can get these skills and work with it, go for it. And her response was totally different. That's why I teach this, because you are in charge of you, right? No judgment. It's important that you are doing what's best for you. And why I caution you to not use it if it numbs you out is because then you can't really get to the underpinnings of the emotional stuff. And what happens, God forbid, if a year from now you can't get access to that medication? What I want to do is to help you guys to prepare yourselves for what happens if you lose access to it. You need these skills. Everyone needs these skills. That's what's important, okay? Going back to powerless thinking, when was the last time that you allowed yourself to pause before reacting? When was the last time that you checked in with your body? When was the last time that you were emotionally aware, that you checked in on, was there a trigger? Where is this urge coming from? What's showing up? Am I seeking pleasure? So another thing that you can do is ground yourself, right? So grounding, touch, keeping your feet on the floor, taking a couple deep breaths in, utilizing a self-talk reset like I'm safe and I can choose something different. I'm here in my body. You can even validate, wow, this is something I really want because it was something I remember from childhood. How am I choosing to include it as part of my meal if I want it? Or not right now because it's not mealtime. So I'm going to have this with my meal later. Do you see how that's different and that's a choice? So powerless thinking is that I can't stop. I don't know how it got in my mouth. It's turning your power over, but taking your power back happens in consciousness. It happens when you recognize there's an urge, though it does require some awareness. You pause, you practice even more awareness by checking in with yourself, asking yourself what choice is the best one for you, and then changing your behavior, okay? So I'm going to go through the 3 Ps that heal you. The pause, we just went through it. The magic moment. Now, this is true magic. This isn't magical thinking, but this is a moment between impulse and action, and this is where self-trust is built, right? So often, real-world tools are that we count to 5 before grabbing food, or we touch our body or the counter, and we ask ourselves, what am I needing right now? We remind ourselves that you don't master the pause in peace when things are quiet. You master the pause in pressure, right? So you aren't going to master these skills when everything is smooth sailing, because guess what? You won't need them when everything is smooth sailing. And this is why the holiday season is kind of like a boot camp, because the pause and utilizing the pause is needed. It's utilized when you're experiencing pressure and stress and when you need a tool. So the pause is something that you master in pressure, not in times of peace. Okay, the other P that's going to help you to heal is your perspective shift, right? So I want you to zoom out and I want you to think to yourself, what is the story that I'm telling myself at this moment about my relationship with food, about what I can or can't do? So what we want to look at is we want to reframe self-trust too. You're not out of control. You're practiced in self-trust and you're unpracticed in attempting to control anything, right? So you want to look at, it's not that you're out of control with food. It's that you haven't created any practice about being in control of anything. Because when you constantly feel out of control and powerless, you need a perspective shift, right? So being powerful isn't always saying no to cookies. Being powerful is presence, another P, but not the one. It's presence with your body, right? It's practice over time. It's playing with new tools. It's checking in with yourself. It's awareness. It's maybe mastering that pause. But the perspective shift needed here is not that you're out of control. It's that you're unpracticed. You don't have the practice in utilizing the skills and tools that you really need. So we also want to reorient to identity. Who am I becoming this season? Instead of what can I get away with? We want to release that thinking of what can I get away with. We want to ask ourselves, who am I becoming this season? How is this season growing me, healing me? Instead of it being the same old, right? And then our third P that helps to heal is practice. We want to normalize the messy middle, right? Because new patterns feel awkward, not wrong. And the thing that we need over and over and over is repetition. Neuroplasticity, right? The science of changing our brain is that reps rewire you, right? So to rewire our brain to become the person we want to be, we've got to practice it. We've got to practice not only that new identity and that becoming, but practice the behaviors, practice the tools and the skills. And how you do that is similar to what I said a minute ago with the pause, is that just like you don't master the pause in peace. You master practice and the pause under pressure, because that's when you need it the most. And another thing that's important as your holiday mantra could be practice over perfection. I'm practicing. And when you do mess up, how can you forgive and be gentle with yourself and redirect? What am I learning from this? Practice also doesn't just build habits, it builds proof. It builds proof. And if you are brand new to me and you have never heard me before, I imagine some of you guys have been listening to my podcast for a little bit, but I am a 12-year post-op and practice is my jam. Every day I'm still practicing. I'm still practicing living this post-op. I'm still practicing healing my relationship with food. I'm still practicing. But guess what? If you look at my photos, you have proof. You have proof that I'm practicing. You have proof, because that's where it is. Are you practicing your becoming? Are you practicing through what you eat, through how you move your body, right? Through hydration, through the support that you're getting, right? I am going into this holiday season and I'm excited. I'm excited. And you know what? There's no shame, there's no blame, and there's no fear, because there's going to be food. If I'm still going to eat, you're still going to eat. And so through this holiday season, it's about choice and it's about practice. And the more that we are supporting the lifestyle that we want to create, we're good. And there's going to be cake. There's probably going to be, some kind of cookie, some kind of ice cream. Not every day of the week, not multiple times a day. And it's not about control, because I know how to pause. I know how to create a perspective shift. And I've been practicing this a while, and I want to give this as a gift to you, right? So before you get stuck in the 4 Ps that haunt you, perfectionism, the procrastination, the people pleasing, and the powerless thinking, I want to gift you with the pause, the perspective shift, and the practice. And these are very important. So as we wrap up today, what's really important that we remember, the scariest thing here isn't the candy, it isn't the cookies, it isn't the cake. It isn't the get-togethers, right? It's believing the lie that you cannot change. Every pause is a portal back to your power, right? So it's very important that you recognize that every new behavior requires repetition and understanding. And I'm going to go over the 3 Ps one last time. The pause creates space between urgent action. The perspective shift reframes I can't into I am learning to. And the practice turns awareness into integration through repetition, regulation, self-trust. And every new behavior requires repetition. Every new behavior requires repetition and re-understanding. Your transformation depends on consistency, not perfection, right? So again, candy here isn't the problem. Your relationship to discomfort, desire, and delay is the problem. Your ability and your nervous system's ability to handle discomfort is directly related to the emotional eating patterns that you may have. So when you master the pause and the perspective shift and you engage in practice, you've mastered yourself, right? This is the practice in the process. So this holiday season, we're going to be letting go of perfectionism, procrastination, people-pleasing, and powerless thinking that haunt your progress. Your pause is your power, your perspective is your protection, and your practice is your path. I have 3 journaling prompts for you that I would love for you to work on after this episode. Where am I haunted by old patterns this season? What can I pause before reacting to? And what would practicing progress instead of perfection look like for me this week? I'm going to put all of this as much as I can into the show notes, because I hope that you can utilize this and all of these tools and teachings from today's session to get you out of the spooky, right, and into the healing, as we want to release any habits that will hijack your holidays and give you the support needed. Also, just as a heads up, join my free group Bariatric Mindset Mavens, which is over on Facebook. And I am running a masterclass special on the Survive Your Holidays Masterclass bundle for a deeper dive, 3 separate masterclasses for one low price of $99. And if this hits home, grab my Survive the Holidays Masterclass bundle. It's your survival kit for staying sane, steady, and self-led all season long. And it has a ton of resources in it, workbooks, etc. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode, sending you a ton of love. And I love sharing value with you all. All right, everyone, have a great day. Lots of love.